So first let's talk about Blender's user interface, or UI for short. When you launch Blender, you get this little splash page, which among other things shows you what version you are using. In this case, the most recent version for when these tutorials are being recorded is 2.64a. Other than what version of Blender you're using, the splash page also shows a cool little image that's been made in Blender. It shows some helpful links, and it shows some recent projects that you've been working on. Just click outside of the splash page to get rid of it and start your new project. Blender's UI is made up of a series of windows that have different functions. Every window has a header and an icon that shows what kind of editor it is. Up here we can see here's the header and there's an icon. Here's a header and there's the icon. Here's a header and there's an icon. By default, Blender has 5 windows open. Here we have an information panel. Here we have the 3D view. Here we have a timeline. Here we have the outliner. And here we have the properties panel. There are many more types of windows, but you won't need to worry about them for now. You can change what type of editor each window is by clicking on the icon and then selecting a new editor type from the list. So if I wanted to change my 3D view into something else, we can click on the icon down here. We get a full list of editor types. And in this case, I'm going to change it to an UV/image editor. So now my 3D view is gone, but I've got a UV/image editor to replace it. You can resize a window by dragging on the edges. So in this case, my outliner is a little cramped right here, so I need a little more room, so I can click and drag to get more. Now we can see more information in our outliner. Also, if my UV image editor here is too big for us, I can shrink it down by pulling on that. And that also leaves room for these to expand. If you need more than just the default 5 windows, you can split off another window by grabbing the little slash marks in the top right corner of any of these windows, they all have them, and pulling on it inward to split off the view and make a second window that is exactly the same. So in this case, it's also a UV image editor. Right now that's not very useful. We don't really need 2 UV image editors, but then we can use what we learned a moment ago and change that view into a 3D view. And now we have a 3D view and a UV image editor. We can pull on that. So this is a more workable space because we can now see kind of a 2D layout and our 3D view. Similarly, we can collapse views by clicking and dragging on the same corner marks, but this time instead of inward to create a new one, we drag outward to collapse. And when you start to collapse, it shows an arrow, still clicking and holding, it shows an arrow in the direction you're about to collapse. If you want to collapse the other direction, in this case I do, because I want my 3D view to override my UV/image editor, you pull the other way while still holding the mouse button down. And now the arrow is facing the other direction. Then you let go, and your 3D view is back to normal. Another thing you can do is duplicate a window rather than being part of this user interface here, you can split it off by holding down Shift and clicking in that corner. And it pops up a new window that you can then place on your second monitor or wherever else you like. I'm just going to close that for now. So there's a lot you can do with Blender's user interface. You can customize it to how you like it and keep it that way overall, or you can adjust it as you're working on certain projects to where you need new windows and you can just adjust that as you go. So it's very well suited to this kind of work because it's what you're working on constantly changes, and so your user interface needs to constantly change. So try customizing your user interface. Pull on some windows, change the type. You're not going to know what every one of these windows does yet, but we'll go over a lot of them later. Just for now, familiarize yourself with how this layout works and what all you can do when adjusting the UI. If you've made a mess of things, like I'm doing right now, just kind of splitting off too many windows, making them the wrong sizes, making things just overall ugly, something that's not very workable like this, you can reset to the factory settings by clicking File, File, Load Factory Settings. and it resets the entire UI back to how we started. Also, if you've got a setup that you really like, and you want it to stay that way every time you open Blender, so in this case, this might be a good layout for you, then you can go to File, Save User Settings, and that will set this UI as the default, and then every time you open Blender, it'll look like this. So play around with Blender's UI, get a feel for it, figure out what you like, what you don't like, how to adjust things, how to use both of your monitors when using Blender, and when you feel comfortable with it, then move on to the next video.